The Magic Paintbrush, Chapter 33. The thing about plans is that until you actually put one into practice, it's only theory. Only crossed fingers and tightly squeezed eyes and hope. There were so many ways that Amy, Lala, and Diego's plan could have fallen apart already, but it hadn't. They'd convinced Chen to meet at a location and time of their choosing. They'd set up the art show, renting space from a friend of Lala's. They'd spent so many days relentlessly painting, creating the artwork now hanging in the gallery, surrounding themselves with an excuse for hired security and witnesses. Lao Lao hoped this would keep things contained if the meeting got out of hand. And they'd coaxed Chen into this secret back room away from the other patrons. But they weren't at the finish line yet. Amy had told herself she wouldn't be intimidated when she reunited with Chen. As it turned out, she needn't have worried. As soon as she saw his face, all she felt was a thrum of anger. Here was the man who'd kidnapped Lao Lao, who'd destroyed her home, who'd taken Luna away. Chen smiled. It was the sort of smile Amy imagined spiders had when a bug arrived. He's in our trap, she reminded herself. Well, Chen's shirt was wrinkled, and his hair stuck up in strange places, as if he'd just woken. Yet his whole being radiated haughtiness. Here I am. Where's your half of the brush? Where's yours? Amy said. Chen sighed. Do you think I came all this way without it? I don't like to waste my time. Besides Amy, Lao Lao Beside Amy, Lala drew herself up to her full height. She wasn't a tall woman, but her bearing made her impressive anyway. Then let's see it. At first, Amy thought Chen was going to push back, but after a moment he said, Fine, you two stay where you are. No sudden movements. He unclasped his messenger bag and brought out the brush. Amy knew it was the real thing. Her jacket pocket hummed as her half of the brush called to its brother. All right, let's see yours, Chen said. When Amy obeyed, his smile widened. He stepped forward. This brush belongs to my family. You've seen my Taotai painting. That proves it. My ancestor created that painting with this brush. His slimy confidence made Amy's stomach roil. He was a thief too. She would have said more, but Lala shushed her with a squeeze of her arm. We hear what you're saying, she told Chen, but we can't just take your word for it. How do we know you're actually related to this ancient painter? How do we even know the painting is actually that old? Let me see it. I used to work in antiquities. Chen scoffed. Do you take me for an idiot? I didn't bring the painting. Was he lying? Amy studied his bag. It was too small to contain the Taotai painting, bulky glass casing, but maybe he'd removed it. Would he risk damaging it like that? Chen met her gaze. Suddenly his voice was softer. He probably thought that made him seem kind, but there was no warmth to go with the softness. I didn't come to fight. You came for the brush. Amy couldn't help but snap the words. I came, Chen said, in hopes that we might both leave with a brush. Lao Lao frowned. Amy's thoughts whirred. They'd prepared for any number of things Chen might say. Lies he'd spew to get his hands on the complete brush. But they hadn't expected this. Elaborate, Lao Lao said cautiously. Chen seemed pleased. Look, I feel we got off on the wrong foot. Some of that is perhaps my fault, but I promise I never expected my Taotai to carry you off. You must take responsibility, too. Invading my home, stealing a family heirloom. He paused here, but neither Lalo nor Amy responded, and after an awkward moment, he cleared his throat and continued. In any case, I am a reasonable person. I'm fair-minded, and I do recognize that while my family has an ancient claim to the magical paintbrush, I don't know how long it's been in your possession. Clearly, you've grown attached to it, and to what you've created with it." He gave Amy a sympathetic expression that made her teeth hurt. She trembled with the force of keeping her anger in check. "I'm still not hearing an explanation," Lao Lao said. "How do you propose we both leave with a brush?" "Ah," Chen tapped his forehead, "a bit of brilliance on my part. That brush can create anything, it seems, even imaginary creatures, even portals between countries, even—" "Yes, I'm aware," Lao Lao interrupted. "Even another brush." "Another brush?" Chen smiled at their shock. "It should be feasible, shouldn't it? Why can't magic create more magic? Of course, it might take a few tries. I learned that with the Tao. But we have time. We can take turns attempting it. I'll even let you go first, as a sign of goodwill." "Now hold on," Lao Lao frowned. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Take a moment to think about it, Grandma. But you have to admit it's the fairest way to take care of things. Both of us will get what we want." He turned to Amy. "I saw how much you loved your little friend. Let's repair the brush so you can bring him back to life." Amy could imagine how Chen saw them, a silly kid and a dotty old woman. There was something too assured and self-satisfied in his eyes. Was this an honest offer? He didn't know Lao Lao was sworn to guard the paintbrush from people like him. Maybe he really had come all the way from China in hopes that they'd all be leaving this meeting happy. Or maybe he, too, had tricks up his sleeve. They'd considered that possibility. They'd included it in their plan. But plans were only theories. Lao Lao looked consideringly at Chen. She was a good actress. Amy almost believed her grandma was actually mulling over his offer. She tried to be equally convincing, making her eyes wide and her expression pleading. "Come on, Lao Lao," she begged. "It's a good idea. Please?" Lao Lao hesitated long enough to make it credible. Then she said softly, "All right." With a flourish, Chen raised his half of the brush and beckoned for Amy to come toward him. Amy took a step forward, then another. Inch by inch, she and Chen closed the gap between them. Amy's painted creatures watched over them, judging the proceedings. Lao Lao had created most of the pieces in the main gallery, but all 4 of these were Amy's. She was 3 yards from Chen, then 3 feet. Chen raised his arm. Amy did the same. They were just close enough for the brush pieces to hover beside each other. A flash of light, a yanking that made Amy pitch forward. She gasped, but didn't let go, not even when Chen's elbow jabbed into her ribs, not even when the bat-winged, bull-horned Tao roared out of Chen's bag. He'd brought the painting after all, but she and Lao Lao weren't alone either. Around them, Amy's paintings shimmered and came to life. Gillies galloped from his painting first. His hooves shook the floor. His cobra head flared out, blood red. Nima came next, a lion on the prowl, his striped tail whisking back and forth. Dyla slithered to join them, a cord of silk with razor fangs. Silo was last to emerge. What he lacked in agility, he made up in girth. Amy had tried to imagine all of her creatures as big as possible, hefty enough to battle the Tao, but she'd had limited time to craft them in her mind. Luna had taken years to perfect, after all. In the end, Nima was barely larger than a bald eagle, and Amy had seen draft horses bigger than Geely's. But Silo was enormous. Each sticky frog toe was larger than Amy's hand. His hummingbird beak stretched out like a javelin. Amy burned with a fierce, radiating pride. Things painted with the broken brush become real after the brush is repaired. She'd known this. Chen hadn't. Chen, whose whole body went loose with shock. The Tao regarded his competition with narrowed eyes and a dervish huff. Then the real battle began. Human against human, creature against creature. Amy's creations didn't need instructions. They saw the Tautai advance on her and threw themselves in its path. Lau had thought 4 magical beasts would be plenty. She'd worried that painting more would lessen the time Amy had to dream each one up. But the Tautai had a natural meanness and violence that gave it an advantage. Their battle scraped the floor and bashed the walls, and panels of art collapsed against one another like dominoes. The air filled with shrieks and hisses and roars, but Amy only caught glimpses of it. She and Lau were too busy wrangling the paintbrush from Chen. He was built like a sapling, but he still had several inches on both of them, and the Tautai's contorted fury shone through his own reddened face. Diego rushed into the room. Amy had warned him to stay outside. It was his job to turn away anyone else trying to see the special exhibit, to reassure them that any strange noises coming from within were just from a movie. But his presence turned the tide for her and Lau. He was just as tall as Chen, and he yanked so hard on Chen's bag, trying to pull him backward, that the strap snapped. The bag went flying, Chen toppled, and Amy wrestled the brush from his grip. She darted away, but she had only a moment to celebrate. On the floor, Diego and Chen continued to scrabble. Neither seemed to notice or care that the brush was gone. They fought to see who would stay down. At first, Chen had the upper hand. Then Diego pinned him, using one of his favorite wrestling moves. "Diego!" Amy shouted. "Diego, stop!" She only meant to tell him that they'd won, that he could back away, but her command made him freeze. He turned to her, trying to see what was wrong. Chen shoved him off, shot to his feet, and before Diego could do the same, Chen stepped forward and pressed his foot on top of Diego's neck.